The storm had rolled in without warning, muting the world in a curtain of gray. By dusk, the neighborhood had fallen silent, street lights extinguished, the hum of machines choked into stillness. Inside the house, only candlelight flickered against the walls, stretching shadows that seemed to breathe with the weather. It was the kind of silence that magnifies every thought, every glance, every hesitation. We were alone, two people in a place too large, a place usually filled with the cushion of background noise, television chatter, distant traffic, the ordinary interruptions of life. Now, with the power cut and the rain hammering against the roof, there was no distraction. Just presence. Just us. I had known her most of my life. That familiarity should have been a safeguard, a barrier against discomfort. Instead, it became something sharper. Familiarity meant history, and history carried unspoken layers, jokes half remembered, looks that lingered longer than they should, moments never voiced but never forgotten. It was as though the storm had stripped the house bare, leaving nothing but the truth beneath. She sat on the couch across from me, curled beneath a blanket, candlelight catching the sharp lines of her face. She wasn't looking at me, but the weight of her presence pressed into the space between us. I caught myself stealing glances, then retreating, as though I had been caught trespassing. "Power won't be back until morning," she said softly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her voice was calm, casual even, but it threaded through the silence like a test. I nodded, forcing a steady reply. "We'll manage. It's just one night." One night. The words echoed louder than intended. One night alone, one night unobserved, one night free from the invisible structures that kept everything in order. The thought was dangerous, and I knew it. Yet I felt it pressing closer, like the thunder rolling outside. Humans, I thought, are cursed with imagination. No other creature takes a simple sentence and spins a web of possibility from it. "We'll manage" should have meant only comfort. Instead, my mind gave it a dozen interpretations, each colored by want, each bending toward places it shouldn't go. I tried to distract myself with the storm. Lightning cut across the window, white veins against black sky, followed by the low boom that shook the floorboards. The sound reminded me of distance, of how vast the world was, how small we were in it. Yet the house felt smaller with each minute, as though the walls were closing around us. She shifted in her seat, tucking her legs beneath her. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulder. I looked away, quickly, too quickly. The silence made every movement significant, as if the storm had slowed time to force me to notice details I should ignore. Inside, a war had already begun. On one side stood loyalty, honor, the weight of promises made long before this night. On the other stood temptation, sharpened by isolation, dressed in the simple disguise of possibility. No one would know. That was the thought that frightened me most, not that it could happen, but that it could happen unseen. She spoke again, voice softer now. "It feels strange, doesn't it? Just the two of us. Like the house belongs to us alone." I forced a laugh, but it cracked at the edges. "Yeah, feels different." Different. The word hung like smoke, neither accusation nor invitation, but something in between. The candle between us flickered, flame bowing to an unseen draft. I leaned forward to steady it, and for a moment our eyes met over the flame. Neither of us looked away quickly enough. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. This was the heart of the conflict, I realized, not the storm, not the blackout, but the fragile line between loyalty and betrayal. A line humans alone seemed cursed to see, cursed to hover at, cursed to test. Other creatures follow instinct, humans invent battles inside their minds. Tonight, that battle had begun. I sat back, breaking the gaze. The flame steadied, the blanket rustled as she shifted again, and the rain drummed harder on the roof. The night was long, and the silence would not save us. The storm did not ease. Hours folded into one another, each minute stretched thin by the rhythm of rain against glass. We had lit 2 more candles, but their light only deepened the shadows in the corners, turning the living room into a half-lit stage where every movement felt deliberate, rehearsed, watched. Conversation came in fragments. We spoke of trivial things, the outage, the weather, the inconvenience of it all, but each word carried more weight than it should have. Beneath the surface, another dialogue ran, one we did not speak but both of us felt. The pauses between our sentences said more than the sentences themselves. Humans are strange in that way. Silence is never truly empty for us. We fill it with interpretation, with projection, with meaning that may not even exist. A glance becomes an invitation, a laugh becomes a confession, and stillness becomes unbearable tension. Tonight, silence was a third presence in the room, pressing closer with every breath. She shifted on the couch, stretching out, the blanket slipping further. I noticed, then pretended not to. My thoughts betrayed me, weaving scenarios, sketching possibilities in the air like invisible smoke. Nothing had happened, yet my mind insisted on telling stories, some sweet, some forbidden. That is the human flaw, perhaps, to imagine so vividly that we feel as though it is real already. Do you ever wonder, she began suddenly, her voice soft but edged with curiosity, what people are really like when no one is watching them? The question cut deeper than the storm outside. I swallowed before answering. I think, people are always two things: who they show, and who they fight to hide. Her gaze lingered on me, candlelight reflecting in her eyes. And which one is more real? I didn't answer quickly. That was another human weakness, our compulsion to chase meaning even when none was intended. I knew she might have asked out of boredom, out of restlessness, but my mind framed it as something else, as a test. I finally said, both. The person you show is the one the world needs. The person you hide, that's the one you need to master. She smiled faintly, then turned her eyes back to the candle. The smile unsettled me, not because it was sinister, but because it was knowing. The silence returned, but heavier now. The house creaked with the storm, and I became acutely aware of the distance between us, small enough to be crossed in a step, large enough to remain safe. That space became a battlefield, every second daring me to close it, every second daring me to resist. Temptation is rarely loud. It is quiet, patient, persuasive in its stillness. It does not shove, it waits. Tonight, it waited between us, and I felt its weight more than the storms. To distract myself, I spoke of memories, childhood stories, old jokes, things that belonged to safer times. She laughed, the sound light but edged with something else. The laughter warmed the room, but it also sharpened the air. Nostalgia is dangerous, it brings closeness disguised as innocence. At one point, lightning flared outside, throwing the room into stark relief. In that brief flash, her face seemed closer, her features sharper, the moment more dangerous. When the darkness settled again, I found my heart racing. It was only a storm. It was only light. But my mind refused to treat it as harmless. I realized then how fragile humans are in their solitude. Left alone, without witness, we invent trials for ourselves. Our greatest battles are not with the world outside but with the quiet inside our minds. I was fighting one now, and the longer the storm held, the harder the battle became. She leaned back, closing her eyes, speaking into the silence. It feels like time has stopped, doesn't it? Like this night is outside the rest of the world. Her words landed like a challenge. Outside the world. Outside consequence. A night detached, unrecorded, unseen. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. I forced myself to stand, pacing toward the window. The rain had slowed, falling in steady streams down the glass. I pressed my palm against the cold pane, grounding myself, reminding myself of the world beyond this house. The storm was real, the night was real, but so were the vows I carried, the principles I claimed to live by. Behind me, I heard the soft rustle of the blanket as she shifted again. I did not turn. I knew that if I looked now, my resolve might fracture. Temptation had not won, but it had not lost either. It lingered, patient, waiting for another chance. And I knew the night was far from over. The storm began to thin near midnight. The rain softened from hammering to whispering, but the silence inside the house only grew louder. With fewer distractions, every sound, the crack of wood, the shift of fabric, the rhythm of breathing, seemed amplified, as though the house itself conspired to remind us how close we were. I sat in the armchair by the window, pretending to study the fading storm. She remained on the couch, the blanket now gathered loosely around her, her hair falling in shadows across her face. The distance between us had never felt smaller, though no one had moved. It was not physical distance that mattered anymore, but the distance between choice and consequence. Humans live in that thin space, I thought. Other creatures act and move on. We hesitate, imagine, suffer through the pull of both desire and restraint. That hesitation is both our curse and our greatness. The silence stretched until she broke it. Her voice was low, almost hesitant, but steady enough to strike through the air. Do you ever feel like, some moments are meant to test us? I turned toward her. The candlelight framed her face in gold, casting the rest of the room into shadow. Every moment is a test, I said, though my voice faltered. She studied me, eyes unblinking, as though she could see the war raging beneath my calm. Then she shifted, moving to sit upright, her legs drawn beneath her. The blanket slipped again, unnoticed or ignored. I felt the air tighten. The silence, the storm, the isolation, it all funneled into this moment, narrowing choices until only two paths remained. Cross the line, or step back from it. Her gaze did not waver. It would be easy, wouldn't it? No one would know. Nights like this, they don't belong to the world outside. Her words were gentle, almost casual, but they struck like thunder. My chest tightened, my pulse quickened. The air between us grew electric, not unlike the storm that had just passed. For a moment, one dangerous, fleeting moment, I imagined it. I saw myself crossing that distance, surrendering to the possibility she dangled. My mind painted it vividly, as if it had already happened. That is humanity's flaw, we can betray ourselves in thought long before we act. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, the sound came, sudden, sharp, unexpected. A knock at the door. We both froze. The sound echoed through the house, so foreign after hours of isolation that it might as well have been thunder. Another knock followed, firmer this time. She glanced at me, wide-eyed, as though the world outside had intruded at the exact moment we were about to slip into something irreversible. I stood quickly, almost too quickly, the relief mingling with dread. Stay here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Crossing the hallway, I reached the door, heart pounding for reasons that had little to do with whoever stood outside. The knock had broken the spell, pulled me back to the larger world, the world of consequence, of promises, of eyes unseen but ever present. I opened the door cautiously. A neighbor stood there, drenched from the rain, asking about the outage, about whether our power had returned. His words were mundane, ordinary, grounding. I answered mechanically, assured him we were fine, and closed the door again. When I returned to the living room, the air had shifted. The tension remained, but it had fractured, disrupted by the intrusion of reality. She sat back, arms wrapped around herself, the blanket once again secure. The fire in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by something quieter, perhaps disappointment, perhaps relief. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The storm outside was nearly gone now, leaving only the faint dripping of water from the eaves. Inside, the silence had changed. It no longer carried the weight of temptation, but the echo of what almost was. I sat down again, not too close, not too far. My chest still throbbed with the rush of adrenaline, with the awareness of how close I had come to surrendering. I realized then that the knock had been more than coincidence. It had been a reminder, the world does not vanish just because the lights go out. Consequence waits, always. Humans are tested not by easy choices, but by moments like this, moments when the wrong path lies wide open, inviting, unguarded. What makes us human is not that we imagine the fall, but that we still find the strength to step back from the edge. The night was not yet over, but the battle had reached its peak. I had faced the line and chosen, for now, to remain behind it. The night stretched on, but it no longer felt endless. The storm had passed, the house had settled, and in the stillness that followed, something within me had settled as well. The tension that had gnawed at every silence had ebbed, leaving only a quiet weight of reflection. She sat across from me again, her posture composed, her gaze lowered to the soft flicker of the candle between us. Whatever had lingered in her eyes before, the daring, the unspoken challenge, had faded. In its place was something gentler, though no less complex. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It wasn't the brittle silence of earlier, thick with possibility, but a calmer one. A silence of acknowledgement, of understanding. Sometimes words only complicate what silence already says perfectly. When I finally broke it, My voice was steady, but softer than before. We were tested tonight. She looked up, searching my face, as though to measure the meaning behind my words. After a moment, she nodded. And you passed. The words struck deeper than I expected. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with something else: humility, gratitude, even sorrow. It is one thing to resist temptation for yourself, another to realize that someone else recognizes it. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. It didn't feel like passing, I admitted. It felt like standing at the edge of something dangerous. Close enough to see the drop, close enough to want it, but still stepping back. That's what makes it passing, she said quietly. Not pretending you don't feel it. Choosing anyway. Her words lingered, heavier than thunder had been. She was right. Humanity's strength lies not in immunity but in choice. We are flawed, tempted, swayed by storms both outside and within. Yet it is in the recognition of our flaws, and in resisting them, that we rise above. I thought of the knock at the door, the sudden intrusion that had saved me from myself. Perhaps it had been chance, nothing more. Yet I could not shake the thought that it was also a reminder, a hand pulling me back from the brink. Humanity has always sought meaning in interruptions, in signs, in the timing of events. Maybe that search for meaning is what keeps us honest. The candles burned lower, wax pooling at their bases. Shadows stretched longer, softer, less threatening now. I realized then that the house had not changed, the night had not changed. I had changed. I was no longer the same person who sat trembling under the weight of silence hours before. I had been tested, and though I carried the memory of the temptation, I carried also the choice not to yield. Tomorrow, she said after a while, the lights will come back on. Everything will go back to normal. I nodded. Yes. And maybe we'll never speak of this night again. Her lips curved in a faint, wistful smile. Maybe that's for the best. But even unspoken, the night would not vanish. It would live quietly within me, not as shame, but as proof. Proof that loyalty can survive temptation. Proof that humanity's greatest strength is not in the victories others see, but in the battles no one ever witnesses. The clock ticked faintly in the background, marking the slow drift toward morning. I closed my eyes briefly, listening to it. Each tick felt like a step away from the storm, a step closer to light. When I opened them again, she was watching me, not with the heat of earlier, but with something softer. Respect, perhaps, or simply understanding. We said little more after that. The night wound down in quiet companionship, the storm fading entirely into memory. The house no longer felt like a trap, but a refuge, a place where I had faced myself and walked away stronger. By dawn, the rain had stopped, the sky beginning to pale at the edges. The world outside was returning, carrying with it the ordinary weight of consequence, of promises, of life as it had always been. And I welcomed it. As the first light seeped through the windows, I understood something simple yet profound. Humanity is not defined by its moments of weakness, but by the choices made in the shadows. What makes us remarkable is not that we are tempted, but that we can look temptation in the eye and still choose honor. The night had tested me. The storm had stripped away distractions, leaving me alone with the raw edge of choice. And though the struggle had been real, the outcome was clear. I had resisted. I had remained loyal. That, I thought as the candles guttered out and the house filled with dawn's light, is what it means to be human.